Okay, so let's talk a little bit about data collection. This is a really important component, and we have to make sure that we're taking data on goals, on behavior, all of those kinds of things, because we have to be able to show objectively what's going on with the child. You have to be very careful about just taking what we would call subjective data, where maybe you're just writing in a notebook everything that happened. It's not that you can't fill those things out in order to help understand or remember what happened, but oftentimes when you're just telling stories and you're just writing out, this is what happened and this is what he did and this is what I did, it tends to be subjective, which means that it's your opinion, it's your view. And so that's oftentimes not admissible in a court of law. You could fill an entire room with boxes of data that's just all this anecdotal writing out in notebooks what happened, and none of it would be admissible. We need to make sure that we have objective data, things that can be very easily measured and compared from one day to the next. For example, I could say this particular child hit 3 times on Monday and 2 times on Tuesday. So it's very objective. I can count it, I can measure it, those kinds of things. And so whether you're a paraprofessional or a teacher or somebody in classroom, it's very important that we have measures to take data, and all of those things need to be an important part of the process. Again, whether it's the IEP goal, how well are they doing the addition problems? Whether it's a goal on using coping skills, how are they doing that independently? Whether it's a goal on reducing problem behavior, how many times did they hit today versus how many times they hit a week from now? That way we can measure our behavior plans and say, is this effective or not? We want to have data to be able to say that. We don't want to say, oh yeah, it seems like it's better. You want to be able to have actual data. And there's lots of different ways. There's something called frequency, where you're just counting it. There's duration, where you can see how long something lasts. If you have a behavior analyst in your school district or a behavior consultant, they may have some other ways of taking data where you look at an interval of time and see, did the behavior occur or not occur in that interval. There's all kinds of ways to really collect a lot of this data. But know, as a paraprofessional, that's probably going to be a part of your job, is to make sure that we have that data. But let me give you an example of how this ended up being a problem by not having the right kind of data. So this was a friend of mine who was actually teaching in a school district, and the family that she was working with was had a program at home. They sued the school district because they wanted the school district to pay for this in-home program. The school district said no. They kept her in this home program for a while it went through due process, and then finally, when it wasn't getting anywhere, they said, fine, we'll send her to school. So this little girl comes to school. She's going to be in my friend's classroom. They come to the IEP with like 120 IEP objectives. It was ridiculous. And I think because there were all these attorneys involved, they maybe brought them down to maybe 60 objectives. But if you think about that, that's a lot of IEP objectives to take data on. And so this teacher, a friend of mine, was, working, and she was trying to be so particular. I mean, this is obviously a family that's been in due process, which is the legal part, and really trying to figure out, make sure I get everything right. And so she had this communication notebook that went back and forth, and she would just say, oh, Susie had a good day today, or Susie had a little bit of trouble today. Maybe Susie had a hard time today, just kind of like trying to be really, really good at communicating with the parents. Well, I don't know what happened other than the parents got upset again, and they pulled her out of school, and it went back into due process. So my friend, this teacher, had to be part of a deposition where the attorneys basically took that notebook and went through it and basically just tore it to pieces. And during the deposition, my friend said, so how many good days? It looks like you've documented that there were 4 good days, 2 days that were okay, and 20 that were kind of bad. And what is a good day? Well, how do you describe a good day? Does mom describe a good day like that? Did she ever get upset? How does that mean it's a good day? What about a rough day? Who's to say she had a rough day? And so you can see what I'm saying. She was just grilled over and over about this document, this notebook that went back and forth. When she was just trying to generally say she had a good day or a tough day, it became very difficult for her to defend. Versus if she had on Monday, this particular student hit 2 times and refused to work 1. On Wednesday, this particular child got 90% of her work done. Those kinds of things are very objective, and that's really what we need to look at when we're doing the data collection piece. We have to make sure that we're really including all of those things that are necessary in order to make sure that we're covering ourselves, that we have the data that looks at measuring how things are going. A lot of times we look at putting some of the information into graphs so we can visually see whether or not behavior is getting better or worse. All of those things are very important. So know that the piece of taking the data is a really important component in a child's progress. One last thing, and this didn't end up being a problem, but in my classroom, a lot of times I would make sure that I was doing the communication with the parents. And sometimes the paraprofessionals do the communication. And this is in no way to say that you would not be able as a paraprofessional to do the communication. But if you said something in a way that was not quite the way the parent liked it, guess who's it's going to come back on? The teacher, right? The teacher is the one that has to be responsible for that. So I had a para, she was great. I mean, she did awesome with these kids. And she wrote in the notebook back and forth about how this particular student's day was. And she put in there one time like, oh gosh, he was a little stinker today. Oh, for whatever reason, that upset mom. That was just like that, just calling, she's calling my son names. And she was just kind of being cute in a way of saying that he was, kind of having a difficult time that particular day. But this mom took it wrong. And so whether or not the paraprofessional or someone is looking at it, I think that the teacher or the person that's responsible should review that, make sure you look at it together and make sure like, that's an area that might not go over very well. How can we make that more objective? How can we make it, he was not a stinker today. Today he refused to work 3 times and was laughing during that time. That might be a better way of describing what that actual behavior looked like, and that's going to be an important piece. Okay, and the last thing is to remember that any time you provide written communication, it is a permanent product forever. It's very important to understand that if you put something in an email, if you put something in a text, that those things become permanent products, and you have to be very careful about what you say and how you say it. I was in a situation where this colleague of mine was frustrated with a parent. And so she would sometimes, after school, she'd say, oh, this parent is driving me crazy. She'd send a text to another colleague, and it wasn't really inappropriate in any means other than she was just complaining about how this parent was driving her crazy. She wasn't calling her names or anything, but it was still like a lot of, oh my gosh, I can't believe she didn't pick up her kid again kind of thing. And this text going back and forth that was just like one teacher supporting another who happened to be friends. Guess what? That parent got mad. It went to due process. Every piece of documentation went into the lawsuit. So every single text that was ever sent, every single email that was ever sent, all of those things become admissible when things go to due process. So it was embarrassing to this teacher that she now had to give this information, and the parent knew that she said something like, oh, it'd be nice if you'd remember to pick up your kid now and then. So please be aware of that. When you communicate to people and you're frustrated about something or you have something important to say, think about it. Is this something I want in writing forever? Or is this something that would be better to communicate directly with the person? Because direct communication is going to be better. Oftentimes emails and text, you can't read inflection and tone, and people start to take things wrong and are offended by things, and it wasn't intended that way. Try to make sure that you have, I know they're difficult sometimes, but have that communication be a part of something that you can do one-on-one with somebody, and making sure that you really do the best and most effective job at communicating.